Good evening, everyone. My name is Andy Lyon. I'm an information officer here on the Swan Lake Fire with Great Basin Team 1. I want to thank you all for coming out on this kind of chilly Tuesday evening. Let you know that we are streaming this live on KPB Alerts, and if you're watching us there for the first time for our meetings, we have a sign language interpreter. Thank you for being here, Rachel. And we are also doing a meeting simultaneously in Sterling at the Community Center. And we are doing them both because, we have a lot of good news from the community today, and we might think that in a couple days you're going to be back to normal or closer to normal, and you might not want to come out to a meeting on Thursday. So we decided to do them both on the same day. So we're going to be hearing from our incident commander, Marty Adell, from the Forest Service, Francisco Sanchez, Tony Fuentes, our incident meteorologist, Dave Jones, assistant superintendent of schools, and Jack Blackwell, the superintendent of the Kenai Peninsula and Prince William Sound with Alaska State Parks. Am I going too fast? Okay, thanks. And then we'll have time for your questions as well, and we have a number of folks in the room. We have the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service folks from the Refuge, Mr. Miller. We have Hans Rinke from Alaska Department of Forestry. We have some other U.S. Forest Service folks as well, and we have our old friend Dan from KPB OEM, a very busy man these last 89 days. And they're on hand to take your questions. We're going to try and keep it short and not talk you to death, but they are on hand. You probably saw the FireWise trailer out front, so the threat from the fire is diminished, but it's not over, and there might be a fire again in the future. So if your property is not FireWise, and if you have not benefited from some of our high-speed gardening that's been going on in Cooper Landing over the past few days, you might want to stop by the FireWise trailer and get information about how that is done. Do we have anybody else in the room that I have forgotten to mention who'd like to be recognized? Any elected officials? Anybody like that? All right, we'll get started with our incident commander, Marty Adell.
Good evening. I'm going to save our... I'll use this stick. I'll save you a little bit. We're keeping our operations folks out in the field this evening, so I'll give an operational update as well as a couple of comments. So we'll start with that. All right, we'll start on the west side and progress to the east. So for most of you know that we had Sterling in a state of ready. We rescinded that as of this morning. We feel very confident on that whole line that goes up the west side. We've had not only very little fire activity in several days, several weeks, but this area in here, we've had several crews put in not only line, but then reinforce that line by cold stacking, basically taking all the material that can burn and feeling it, making sure it's all cold, and then stacking it into the black so it's not a concern anymore. Coming around, we've got some unsecure line in that Echo division right in here, but since it's surrounded by a tremendous amount of burned area, or it's not a real concern, the only real concern is not from the fire at this time, but more of the falling trees. And we're keeping that closed for the time being, just to see how far we can go as far as maybe securing some of those falling snags. Do a little bit of structure protection down in the Derosion area. We've got a wildfire use team in there protecting that maybe securing, doing either some structure protection directly or moving out a little bit and trying to hit some of the fire head on. Coming around more to the east side, along the river, with the cooler temperatures, higher relative humidities, and the little bit of rain we have been getting, I'll thank our meteorologist for that. We've been able to do a couple different things, really to kind of pull back on some of the urgency of trying to get up into those more dangerous areas, especially in the Mystery Creek drainages, Trout Lake, just a tremendous amount of dead snags that are standing that we are concerned with, and we are able to reinforce many of the lines that were already put in or that we've put in, and then secure more of the structures in this area. With that, we've got a couple clips of some areas. Speaking of, let's see, where we go. We've got a drone that we're able to take so everybody can see kind of what we're doing and what we're looking at. We'll start with clip 1. In this beginning, I'll give you a little bit of direction. We're facing the southeast along Bean Creek Road. It's showing the parking lot. Obviously, kind of what we're doing as far as the pumpkins, the hose lay that goes up and along the roads, and then also the prep. You can see along the road, it's cleared out tremendously all the way along that. So we have a little bit safer area to light off a backfire if we need. And then how far it goes. And you can see that it just continues to go and then terminates at Kenai Lake. Clip 2. Thank you. Clip 2, we're facing northwest at this point along the Bean Creek Trail again, looking into Resurrection Trail, Juneau Creek area. And then as we pan up a little bit, you can see where we start getting into further up in the drainage, where we start looking at some of the hot spots that are still smoldering, and up in this neck of the woods right in here. Clip 3, once again, starts showing the parking lot area and some of the hose lays that we've put in the Bean Creek Trail, or on the Bean Creek Trail. Then once again, left side of the trail, it is prepped for any backburning we may have to do. And it just keeps following that up. And the last one we have begins at the intersection of Bean Creek and Resurrection Trail. If you look real close, you can see the trees that are whipping. The wind we had yesterday was twofold of a benefit. One, we did pull a lot of our resources away from the fire, but with that wind, it did two really important things for us. Push down a lot of those dead snags or those fire scarred snags, as well as really push that westward line over near Sterling. That gave us a great opportunity to be in place if anything pops up, but then also test that line to see how much work the work that we have done, see how well we've taken care of the fire at this time. All right. The last thing I wanted to let everybody know, we spoke on this last week when thank you. Spoke on it last week when we as a team were told that we're coming to the end of that extension. Next week Monday will be our last day. We've done the complexity analysis with the agency administrators and the fire management officers to figure out what type of team we're getting in. And the team that we're getting in is a Type 2 long team. They will have all of the available sections that are needed: operations, logistics, PIOs, public information officers, planning, for a fire of this size and this magnitude. We won't know what team exactly will come up, but our plan as a team is, once we know, to start contacting those individuals. We're not expecting them to be up here till Sunday, but we can start passing along all the very, very pertinent information as far as lay of the land, the condition of fuels at this time, agency administrator numbers, and and just kind of the overall plan. This way they can get here, and instead of having to learn everything from scratch and then us leaving, we're able to really digest that information and come up, to continue our plan moving forward. So that's all I have for this evening. I'll take questions later. Thank you.
Okay, and Tony, our incident meteorologist. Tony, do you need a pointer? Yep, we do. Here you go, right here. Use the top one. It's the green button.
All right, good evening. My name is Tony Fuentes. I've been the incident meteorologist for the Swan Lake Fire. I just want to start off by talking about the weather pattern we've seen mostly start over the weekend and go up until now. A lot of it was driven by a low pressure center just off to our southwest, provided some rounds of wind and some much welcome rainfall across the area. So just as a timeline, the first wave of precip that we saw ahead of the storm came in the Friday night to Saturday morning time frame. And basically around the perimeter during that time frame, we saw an average about 0.15 of an inch of precip. So very beneficial to get anything on the fire, and also from our fire behavior analyst, also helps minimize some of the active fire behavior. Anything helps, and it certainly did, going out into the field observing. Then the next couple of days, we transitioned to more of a focus on the winds. We started picking up some gusty southeast winds Saturday, and Sunday was really the main day we were focused on having strong and gusty winds from the southeast going towards the northwest. So overall, what ended up occurring on Sunday, widespread gusts in the 20 to 30 mile per hour range. In some of the wind-prone areas that like to really channel and rip through the highway. Can we go back to one previous here, especially here in this Sterling Highway corridor right there, Hideout Hill area. The gusts through there were upwards of about 45 miles per hour, so it was a really quite windy day, and field reports down here where we don't have too many weather observations. Pretty strong winds, white caps, and from the reports impacted some of the boat operations out there for some rough waters. So overall, next round of precip we got mostly stayed west of the perimeter, and that was last night. As if it almost knew where the fire was, it just kind of stopped right there. Where our incident command post is in Soldotna, we picked up about anywhere from like a quarter to a third of an inch, a little farther west. But last night into this morning, we finally got rain onto the fire perimeter, and these amounts that you see here are what was reported by weather stations across the area. And overall, it's looking we received about 0.2 of an inch, a quarter of an inch on the fire itself directly last night into this morning. If you see just down the road here, some pretty good amounts too going towards Quartz Creek in that area by the airfield, about 0.5 inch of rainfall. So great to have some of this moisture in the area, and anything that we can get on there has been very beneficial. So just what I want to talk about for the next few days is we're going to go into a little bit of a pattern for quieter weather, at least for heading into the weekend. We're looking at our winds starting to back off. They're a little breezy today, but they should become fairly light through Friday into Saturday. It's a drying pattern, so we shall see some breaks in the sky cover, and like I said, lighter winds prevailing through the next couple of days. So with that in mind, can we go to the next slide coming up here? Number 2. What I wanted to focus in on is kind of the near-term forecast and then a little bit beyond. So what we're looking at for about the Sunday to Monday time frame, there is another low-pressure center that's expected to move through the area. The overall trend of it is being fairly weak. It's slowing down. I'm not expecting a whole lot of precipitation with it, but at the very least, it should help increase our relative humidities, which can slow down some burning activity. But overall, a few hundreds of an inch of rain maybe with that storm. But looking into next week too, we're overall not looking to remain in a stagnant pattern, which is relatively good things. We want to see some of these lows come in and provide us with rounds of precipitation, not all at once, but ideally kind of spaced out, so we don't have to really worry about flooding and debris flow type issues. So for next week, I just put up a map here. This is really looking kind of midweek next week. And the thing to kind of focus on these blue areas, it's indicating troughing in the upper atmosphere. And so with that, that's what would help produce low pressure systems and precipitation and a little wind. So what we're just looking at in the next week or two, trying to get a sense if there's any type of pattern that would produce a big high pressure ridge. And what that really would do is block incoming systems from making it to Alaska, to the south coast, and putting us in a dry spell. But overall, what we've been seeing fairly consistently is that the pattern looks progressive. It means it allows the door to be open for low pressure systems to come in, maybe a few days of break in between, like we're going to see the next couple days, and then another low move in. So overall, seeing this general pattern just developing into next week, so possibly another system by Wednesday. Overall, it's a little far out, but it's looking like a wetter system than we're going to see this weekend. And just looking beyond for one more slide here, this is a graph that comes from what we call an ensemble model. Basically, it's taking one run, tweaking things a little bit, and running it about 50 times and seeing what it produces. And with that, you can build some confidence whether you're going to see a certain pattern change or stay relatively in a fixed, steady state pattern. So basically, a lot of these different types of models that show these ensemble spreads, what you're basically looking at is an accumulated rainfall amount going, you can't see the bottom ledge here, but basically mid-month to the middle of the month. What are all these different iterations of this model showing us? And going out 2 weeks, I really wouldn't pay attention to the amounts of precipitation, but overall the trend. Like I mentioned before, that trend shows that trough aloft, so it's allowing periodic low pressure systems to come into the area. And this is borne out too with this ensemble run. The overall trend is to allow moisture to come in here, maintain a cooler and wetter pattern, which would be what we want to see, at least as far as the fire behavior goes. So with that, no big signs of any abnormal drying or big winds or anything like that. And just one more thing to touch on too, as far as smoke transport. With this precipitation, the fire behavior has quelled a little bit, so not as much smoke that we've seen recently. So looking out, maybe what this little model simulation is going to show you is if you took on average the winds we expect the next 10 days or so, what's the average prevailing wind direction? And in this case here too, what you're seeing on average is kind of a southerly wind, winds coming from the south going towards the north. So as far as a smoke transport, if there were to be additional smoke put up, a lot of that would be carried off from the south towards the north. So a good direction for getting some of that smoke out of here. Over the weekend, we had about 3 or 4 days of persistent southeast winds, which was really good for getting that smoke out of here and clearing out the air. So overall, as a whole, fairly promising in that aspect. Thank you.
Thanks. Hi, my name is Dave Jones. I'm the Assistant Superintendent for the school district on the Kenai Peninsula. And I want to say it's nice to be here, and I want to tell you it's nice to have a school to be here in and have a meeting, okay? A week ago, was a little different outlook here. And so the first thing I'd like to do is thank all of our welcome visitors here. If you've got green pants on and not so clean yellow shirts and any of these things, OEM folks that are here, Fish and Wildlife, everybody that had part of saving this community, this school, we'd like to thank you with a heartfelt applause. If you guys have spent any amount of time in this community, you know that this building here truly is the center of this community. This building is used not only in the day for a school, but it's used at night for all kinds of activities of the people in this community. It would have been devastating to lose this building. So we can't tell you how much it's appreciated that your efforts that you put through. We know it's been long hours, and everybody always hasn't been as nice as I have, I think, but we appreciate you being here, and you did a great job. and I know there are a lot of people locally that did things that I'll never know all the people to thank, but I do know of one guy locally that I do need to thank. And Tommy, would you stand up, please? Because we needed to have the building open and made available on several times, and we needed eyes on to see what was happening. And you know, he wasn't officially on duty, but he was on duty for whenever we called him, and we appreciate it. Okay, thank you, Tommy. And the rest of the people that we don't know what you did up here to help us out, we appreciate that as well. The good news is tomorrow is back to school for our kids in Cooper Landing. Okay, that's awesome. There's some kind of return to normalcy in Cooper Landing, and we're fired up about that. Okay, for the kids and the parents, for the days we've missed, Superintendent O'Brien wrote a letter today to the Department of Ed to request that they give us a waiver on those days, and that would mean that we don't have to make those days up in the calendar. You know, normally if we have a snow day or some kind of day off, we got to make that up. We've requested a waiver on it. I think we're hoping to have a favorable reply on that, and as soon as we know, we'll let you know where it's at. Other than that, I don't have a lot to say except, again, everybody that's here, it's nice to have a building to be in, and thank you for helping us save this community and this building. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And now we have Jack Blackwell to talk about the welcome news about the river.
Marty. Thank you, and good evening. I appreciate the community coming together here this evening, and it's a pleasure to be here. The state of Alaska manages the Kenai River Special Management Area, and it's a state park area. The river flows through and adjacent to federal lands, and together with our federal partners, we do our best to try to manage the river cooperatively. When the Swan Lake Fire crossed the Sterling Highway, there was concern that the fire would continue towards the east and cross the Kenai River. And so on the 18th of August, State Parks issued a boating closure on the upper Kenai River between the Cooper Landing boat launch and Ski-Lac Lake. And we recognized that this was a huge impact to the community. The river is vital to the people of Cooper Landing, and it's critical for the local economy. And we're very sensitive to the impact that it had on this community, and regret that we had to take these actions. But after talking with fire managers, we recognized that at some point risk would decrease, fire activity would decrease, and we'd likely be in a position to start opening up sections of the river, one piece at a time. And after talking with and meeting with fire managers in the last couple of days, I'm pleased to announce that effective tomorrow, we'll be able to start opening up a section of the upper river. And so tomorrow, the upper Kenai River will open on a daily basis between 6 a.m. and 6 p.m. Between the Cooper Landing boat launch and Sportsman's Landing. Downstream from Sportsman's to Ski-Lac, the river will remain closed due to fire activity and fire personnel that are working in this area. But at this time, I'm pleased to announce that. And as fire behavior continues to decrease and risk decreases, we anticipate that we'll be able to continue with monitoring this on a daily basis. And when things are in when risk is decreased to acceptable level, then we can open things back up. But again, I appreciate the community coming out together, and really thank you for your patience during this incident. The community's really come together and rallied, and we appreciate that. And I would just stress that while there still are some closures on federal lands and on the river, please pay close attention to those closures too. It's important to stay out of the way, fire activity and fire personnel. So, thank you.
I'll let you introduce yourself.
Good afternoon, everybody. Again, my name is Francisco Sanchez. I think most of you know me, but I am your local district ranger with the Forest Service here in Seward. Sure. Anyway, well, it's been a long season for a lot of us, and why I'm up here is to thank the Great Basin Team 1 for the great work that they've done for the last 3 weeks. Thank you, Marty, Adell, and his team. And I also want to really thank the other 2 agencies, the Division of Forestry, Hans and Tim, and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, Andy Loringer and Steve Miller. Thank you guys for the great work that we worked together, and we had some tough days, but all together we worked as a group, and I think we made some good decisions. And again, what I want to say is thank all the people of Cooper Landing for your due diligence and your patience through this. But that's all I want to say. Thank you very much.
All right, folks, we have time, lots of time, for questions if you have any. Yes, ma'am. So the question is about the Russian River campground. Is it going to be open up so people can access the river?
So we're currently talking about our fire restrictions and opening the campground. So we need a few more days of just working through that. But as soon as I know, I promise I'll let you guys know as soon as possible. But our hopes is to open it up in the very near future.
Other questions? We're going to get off easy. Yes, ma'am.
This would probably be for Marty. So there's probably, I'm not the only one in the community with some trepidation about the change in teams going from type 1 to type 2. Because we've been down that road before, from type 2 to type 1. And then everything blew up. It took forever to get people back in here. So tell us anything to make us feel better about that.
So let me paraphrase the question for our online audience, and it's some nervousness about transitioning from a type 1 to a type 2 team and what that means, because the community has had some experience with that in the past. And then the fire blew up, as we know, and it took some time because you're in Alaska and it takes a while to get resources here. So she'd like our incident commander to address those concerns. Did I botch that, or did I get okay?
All right. I can't speak to what obviously I wasn't here a while ago, but we are making plans, making sure that one, the actions that we have taken, that we've planned out, looking not only at weather that has been described to us, it looks like in our favor. Once again, I never depend on what might happen. We've got operations, Matt Bowers and Ian Sutterfield. I'm sure most people here know exactly who Ian is, and because he's been working right in town to make a plan, contingency plans, and then tertiary plans to make sure that we have everything in line. So when the team that's coming in, regardless of who it is, the Type 2 team, which many of us have worked with, most all of them down in the lower 48, that they have our plan intact, the one that has been working to this point, continuing forward. We will also leave them with plenty of resources to make sure that they can continue the work that we've started. We are not depleting any of the resources, whether it be crews, helicopters, engines. There are a few that will be leaving shortly just because they're timing out. They've worked 3 weeks straight. They need a couple days off. But we are moving forward. Also, the nice thing about us knowing in advance that we're going to get this team, we can prep the team coming in. It's not as if the fire's taken off and we're scrambling to get somebody here. We are here. We are staying here. We are not taking, as you know, many of our old basketball or baseball coaches say, not taking our eye off the ball. And we are maintaining a presence here until they get in, until that team knows what we've seen, what we've been dealing with, the contacts throughout the community, and to make sure they have the plan moving forward.
Thank you.
Yes.
Other questions? Yes, ma'am.
Follow up on that about numbers. 600 and some people are here now. Do they all leave and who comes back? What kind of numbers are coming and going?
So the question is about numbers. We have 700, I believe, right? Close to 700 people. And what's going to happen a week from now as we transition to a new team? Who's coming, who's going? What does that look like?
First and foremost, the incident management team, when we travel, we've got a certain amount of people, plus trainees, that are in the 50s, as a full team or a long team, as we call it, which that is what is coming up. As far as resources, engines, helicopters, and I'm going to screw this up, Matt, a little bit, but I think we're going to have at least 6 crews guaranteed. We're going to have a bunch of engines and 4 helicopters. And then everything else will be spread throughout the state, and so we can always get that stuff back in a relatively quick manner if we need. So I'm guessing if you're looking for a specific number, I'm thinking around about 400 folks when we leave.
And so you know, for those folks online and in the room, the maps behind us, most of them are up on INCIWeb every day, and you can download those and print those if you want to look at them. And also on INCIWeb, we publish the number of personnel so as that number goes up and down, that number gets changed. We do a count, and it lags a little because we do it at the end of the day, and you know it's not up to the moment, but that number is published on INCIWeb right there on the front page. If you scroll down, you'll see incident information. We have an online question. We'll take one of those. All right. Jack, I'm sure this is going to be for you. Is Upper open for fishing? I think we're talking about the river, obviously, and I know there's Upper and there's Upper, but beyond that, I'm afraid I'm...
The fishing regulations remain in effect. There's no changes to those. If there are, they'll be issued through an emergency order. So,
Other questions? Yes, ma'am, in the back.
How long will they keep the hoses around our house?
Good question. The question is, how long, for those homes that have sprinkler systems and hose around them, how long will those be in place?
Certainly cannot give you a drop-dead date, but they will be in there as long as the threat is in there. There is no intention to pulling them out at any time. Part of the team that's coming in, they're going to know full well, and we've already discussed this with many of the agencies, that we are not going to start pulling. We're not going to rehab dozer line. We want to maintain that through the point that there's so much precipitation, there's nothing left, or you've got snow already. So they will be in there for several more weeks, for sure. Okay, and just real quick, just to get back to you, I don't think I quite answered your question fully. Another Another tact we are also taking is, as people time out, we're staggering their time back in. So we, for instance, if a crew's coming in for 2 weeks, we're trying to get them here to work with us for a solid week. And then as the new team comes in, there's that transition and or carryover to the next team. So all the operations are very smooth and very in sync as they go forward. So just want to make sure I tied that in also.
This one's for you too, Marty. So will there be enough crews, this is from online, will there be enough crews on site to fight it until the fire is completely out? And I think part of that Marty already answered. We still need a season-ending event to put it out, but I'll let you expound on that.
When someone says put out a fire, especially of this size and in these conditions, you're going to see smoke for quite a while. I can almost guarantee it that the first time you get 3, 4, 5, 6 inches of snow, you're still going to see puffs of smoke coming up through the snow from time to time. We are going to leave crews that are going to work with the team coming in and also with the agencies after we leave, that they will have enough crews to battle anything that rears up and be able to use either the lines we've put in or contingency lines that we have put in. So yes, we will have crews available.
All right. Other questions in the room? Yes, sir, all the way in the back.
How long are you going to be using the pilot cars? And I want to thank you for giving out the green cards so we can get past things now.
Question is, how long are we going to use the pilot cars? And Dan can correct me, but I believe they went away as of midnight.
They did, and the pilot cars you see now are strictly because of the construction. So they are still on standby. I do want to emphasize that just in case something operationally happens or that's necessary for safety or for the firefighters. But the pilot cars you're seeing are for construction as of this morning. They were that mile 70 to mile 40. Those traffic control points are no longer there. Do keep in mind that Ski-Lac Lake Road is still closed because of all the fire activity happening back there.
All right, we do want to be respectful of you folks' time. We know you have other things to do, so we'll continue to take a few more questions. Yes, ma'am. So the question is, and I'll paraphrase, because the duff layer is several feet deep in places here, and it's burning down all the way, that those fires can continue to burn and hold over, and we had the same question from online. So what, if anything, can we do, or are we thinking about so that we don't see fires pop out next spring and summer from what's on the ground right now? Anybody want to make that prediction? We'll have the Department of Forestry, the local experts, talk about that. Thank you.
Thanks, Andy. Good question. Nothing more I like talking about than duff and peat. But you're exactly right. So with these very dry conditions and deep burning fires, we're going to see that. We're going to see more smoke on the landscape next year. And, I'll just use the Kenai River, for example. I think that year we had a pretty light winter after that fire. We responded somewhere in the neighborhood of low teens, 14 or 15 fires that popped up from that fire. And those were all reported from the public. And that's what we'll rely on in this situation, too, is it's very important for all of us, for everyone in this room, the community, to, next year, if you see those smokes come up, make sure you report those. Marty and the team and the crews that are here, they're working on mopping up the perimeter of those fires, right? But, as we know, one ember in the right place that can overwinter can lead to that more smoke in the springtime. So we'll rely on the folks in this room and the public here to report those fires so we can address them or suppress them in the spring. All
right, another question from the room? Yes, ma'am.
Will you be continuing with the water dumping on the fire, or are you going to rely on the rain?
And the question is, will we be using helicopters and water buckets and scoopers, or are we just counting on Mother Nature?
Both. The wonderful thing about rain and precip, it not only just does it get water directly to the ground, but it brings up the relative humidity. And whenever the finer fuels start retaining some of that moisture it can get from the air, that's sometimes better than rain. So whenever we get rain, we certainly are happy to get the RHs come up, but as far as we're concerned, we'll continue to use the helicopters and the air tankers as much as we think that safely can be done. You know, we don't want to fly in an area, a smoke that's well interior, and put a pilot at risk. But if there is any idea that we think that it will be beneficial to not only the area but the rest of the fire, we will definitely continue on with that. No, we had one question. Does that answer your question? Okay. I had one question. How many firefighters injured have been, let's see, how many firefighters injuries have been, and severe? Okay, oh, sorry. Should read it all the way through. So we've had 10 firefighters that have been injured so far. A couple bee stings, as you guys are known for your wasps, evidently. Wasps and salmon. And had a couple burns with the duff burning so deep right now. It's very difficult for some of the firefighters to just, as you're walking through, it'll burn very deep. They'll step into these ash pits and step into it, and it's burning deep enough to where it's up over their boot, and have had a couple burns around the knee, high thigh area. So that's a caution to everybody out there. Once we start getting this thing knocked down and you start getting back out there, be very wary of that. We've had a couple issues of, just some minor stuff, cuts and scrapes, chainsaw, Pulaski knife kind of thing. And there was one more. I guess that's it for right now. So, yeah. The severity as far, had a couple second-degree burns, and the bee stings for the couple folks that are allergic. Many of the firefighters are being stung, as you can imagine. But we've had 2 that were allergic. One young lady had been in the hospital for several days, and actually she's just gotten released today, and she's going home. So very happy about that. So that's what we've had so far. Thank you.
All right, we'll take one more online question for Jack, and then we'll get back there and take 1 or 2 more from the room. And as always, these folks will be hanging out, and we have maps, and we can answer your questions here up close and personal. And Jack, the question is the Russian River open for bank fishing?
Again, let's see, in Francisco, I actually might pass the baton to you, since this is a Russian River.
That's all right. So the campground is closed, okay? So I believe that people, because the upper Kenai is going to be open, people will be stopping there on the confluence, and I expect people to probably try to walk up the Russian River. And I'm okay with that, but the campground will be closed, and it is marked closed, and I'll have ribbon across each of the entrances that go up to the Russian River. So again, yes, it will be, people will be using the Russian River.
All right, hold on a sec. I promised this lady in the back.
Sorry if you're getting late, but my property has a 30-foot utility easement next to it, and the trees have been trimmed for years and years that hang over my garden and my house. Do you have any communication with them, or how do you address that?
Well, we have the question was about utility easements and excess vegetation along that easement, and you're standing next to one of our liaison officers, and I can tell you that utilities have been part of one of our cooperators, and we've been talking with them. They've been part of our meetings I think, every day. And so you can talk offline with Aaron there, and he can help you get that question resolved. And we'll take a couple more, and then we'll wrap it up. You had a question, sir?
Yeah, some of us folks are, we're locals, and there's some of assistance. It would be nice for us to go into the Russian River campground and get a piece of this for the winter. Just the locals.
So the question is that a few locals count on the silver salmon for food for the winter, if I'm getting that right, and they'd like to be able to go into the Russian River to fish. Francisco, you want to?
I really don't know how to answer that. I do know that I just couldn't allow just locals to do something like that. It's just not the fair thing to do. But again, we are talking about lifting some of the restrictions and the closures in the very, very near future. So please bear with us just for a couple more days, and I'm hoping that everything opens up so all the locals can use it as well as other users. Thank you.
All right. Any other questions from our audience here? We had one last question from online. Were any structures damaged by the fire? I do know that radio repeater owned by the Fish and Wildlife Service up on Hideout Hill was damaged, not burned, but the repeater is not working. And I don't think we have any others. So for a fire of 168,000 acres, and of course, mostly wilderness and refuge, but your cabins, the ones you like to use along the lake and out in the woods, they're still there. It may take us a while to provide safe access to those, but that's good news with all the other good news we've had today. So thank you very much, folks, for coming out. Those of you who are watching online, I want to thank my tech support team of Jenny, Dina, and Tim, as well as Marguerite and Kathy in the back, and Ernie, who helped us locally, and Tommy, who set up most of this stuff by himself, even though we said we could do it. Thank you, Tommy. Thank you all, and hopefully you won't see us again, but we'll hold another meeting if we need to. Thank you very much.